$100 million buys a lot of things. It buys private islands, bought silence, and experimental bone marrow therapies in Swiss clinics. But it didn't buy Caprice a cure. It took a guy making $14 an hour, wielding a mop smelling of cheap pine, to notice the truth. The needle slid in, cold. Caprice watched the clear fluid spiral down the IV tube, $100,000 of synthesized proteins dissolving into her ruined veins. The clinic smelled of ozone and rubbing alcohol, masked poorly by a faint, engineered lavender scent pumped through the climate control. Dr. Andrew Blackwell hovered near her chair. He wore a cashmere sweater that cost more than the average car, smelling faintly of cedarwood and polite, expensive concern. He checked the monitors, his manicured fingers tapping the sleek tablet. "The stem cell response is sluggish, Caprice," Blackwell said, keeping his voice in that practiced, soothing register reserved for dying billionaires. "But the new mitochondrial wash should stabilize the nerve degradation. We just need to give the gene therapy time to knit." Caprice didn't look at him. She looked at her hands. The skin, once taut and aggressively moisturized, now hung loose over her knuckles. Her joints ached with a deep, grinding pressure, like ground glass packed between the cartilage. "Time," she rasped. Her throat felt coated in rust. "You billed my family office $12 million last month, Andrew. I can't hold a Mont Blanc pen without dropping it. I'm losing clumps of hair in the shower, and my tongue tastes like I've been sucking on old pennies." Blackwell offered a sympathetic, useless smile. "Neuropathy and dysgeusia. Unfortunate but expected side effects of the aggressive immunosuppressants. Your body is fighting an incredibly rare, unidentified autoimmune collapse. We are rewriting your cellular blueprint. It's going to be violent." Violent. Caprice closed her eyes. That was one word for it. She was 42 years old, the CEO of an international logistics empire that moved billions of tons of freight across the globe, and she was currently confined to a leather recliner, actively decaying. She had bought the best minds in molecular biology, imported specialists from Tokyo and Geneva, and built a private diagnostic lab in the basement of her corporate headquarters. They ran panels for diseases that hadn't existed since the 16th century. They tested her genome. They mapped her microbiome. And she was still dying. An hour later, the infusion finished. Her driver, a silent ex-military man named Thomas, helped her into the back of the Maybach. The leather seats felt cold, hard against her atrophying muscles. The city blurred past the tinted windows, a gray smear of concrete and wet asphalt. The vibration of the tires hummed through the floorboards, settling directly into her aching bones. She arrived at the Aldridge Tower just after 3 in the afternoon. The transition from the underground parking garage to the private elevator was a meticulously choreographed routine. No one could see the CEO stumble. No one could know that the shark was bleeding in the water. She stepped into her corner office on the 60th floor. It was a sprawling, minimalist monument to her power. Floor-to-ceiling glass overlooked the jagged skyline. The surfaces were brushed steel and raw, imported basalt. The thermostat was locked at a sweltering 82 degrees because her body no longer produced enough heat to keep her from shivering. She walked to her desk, dragging her left foot slightly. The heavy wool of her custom suit felt like a lead apron. She collapsed into her chair, her breath coming in short, sharp hitches. The silence of the soundproofed room was absolute, broken only by the faint, high-pitched ringing in her ears that never stopped. On her desk sat an artisanal, unglazed ceramic pitcher. It was a dull, earthy red, hand-fired by some reclusive wellness guru in the Andes, guaranteed to purify and ground the water within. Blackwell had recommended it. Blackwell recommended a lot of things. Beside it sat a bowl of fresh lemons. Caprice forced her right hand to reach out. Her fingers trembled, vibrating with a chaotic, uncontrollable frequency. She grabbed a lemon half and squeezed it over a heavy crystal tumbler, the acidic juice stinging a paper cut on her thumb. She grabbed the heavy pitcher. It took both hands to lift it. The water splashed unevenly into the glass, mixing with the lemon. She drank. The water was room temperature, earthy, and sharp. The metallic taste in her mouth flared, a sickeningly sweet, garlicky undercurrent that made her stomach heave. She clamped a hand over her mouth, waiting for the nausea to pass. She looked at her reflection in the darkened glass of her computer monitor. Her skin was gray, devoid of blood. Her eyes were hollow. She had $100 million sitting in a liquid account, ready to be wired to anyone on Earth who could fix her. She picked up a ceramic mug from the morning's untouched espresso. Her fingers went entirely numb. The mug slipped, hitting the edge of the basalt desk and shattering into a dozen jagged pieces across the hardwood floor. Caprice didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at the shards. the dark stain of stale coffee soaking into the pale wood. She slowly pushed the pieces under the desk with the toe of her Italian leather pump, hiding the mess. She was so tired of cleaning up. Dallas Vanthorpe pushed his janitorial cart off the freight elevator, the heavy rubber wheels squeaking against the polished concrete. The cart was a chaotic, rattling island of industrial chemicals, smelling aggressively of bleach, synthetic lemon, and damp microfiber. It was 10 p.m. The 60th floor of Aldridge Tower was deserted, a cavernous expanse of silent cubicles and darkened glass offices. Dallas adjusted his utility belt, the heavy canvas pulling at his lower back. He was 38, but his spine felt 10 years older. He unhooked the trash ring and started his rounds. Empty the paper recycling. Wipe down the communal espresso machines. Swap out the air filters. Keep his head down. He worked the night shift because it paid $3 more an hour, and because it meant he could put his 7-year-old daughter, Chloe, on the school bus in the morning. Chloe had severe asthma and a penchant for outgrowing her shoes every 3 months. Dallas's life was an exercise in brutal, unforgiving mathematics. Rent, groceries, copays, inhalers. There was no margin for error. He moved methodically down the executive corridor. He liked the night shift. It was quiet. He didn't have to navigate the awkward, invisible barrier between the people who wore $1,000 suits and the guy who scrubbed their toilets. To them, he was part of the architecture, a ghost in a blue uniform. He approached the double doors of the corner office. The brass nameplate read, Caprice Aldridge, Chief Executive Officer. Dallas swiped his key card. The lock clicked, and he pushed the door open. Immediately, a wave of oppressive heat hit him. It was like walking into a terrarium. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a smear of window cleaner across his forehead. He hated cleaning this office, not just because of the heat, but because it felt like a crime scene. He pushed his cart inside and grabbed a fresh trash bag. He approached the sleek, modern wastebasket near the desk. He pulled out the liner. It was heavy. Inside, he saw the remnants of uneaten, ridiculously expensive food, quinoa bowls untouched, cold-pressed juices half full and separating, but there was other stuff too. Bloody tissues. Clumps of fine, brittle hair sticking to the plastic. Empty bottles of heavy painkillers and anti-nausea medication. The CEO was sick. Anyone with eyes could see that. Sometimes Dallas saw her in the lobby during his shift overlap. She looked like a reanimated corpse propped up by tailored wool and sheer spite. But it wasn't the trash that bothered Dallas. It was the smell. He knelt to wipe down the baseboards, his nose wrinkling. Beneath the expensive, subtle scent of the automated citrus diffusers, there was something else. A sharp, sweet, decaying odor. It hung heavy in the stifling heat of the room. It smelled distinctly like old garlic mixed with the metallic tang of an overheated car battery. Dallas stopped scrubbing. He sat back on his heels, his joints popping in the quiet room. He closed his eyes and inhaled through his nose. He knew that smell. Before the layoffs, before the economy tanked and he lost his pension, Dallas had spent 12 years working as a pipe fitter in a commercial chemical refinery out in the valley. He had spent a decade surrounded by hazardous materials, reading safety data sheets, and watching guys get pulled off the line for exposure. He knew the smell of ammonia leaks. He knew the dizzying sweet scent of benzene. And he knew the garlic and metal stench of heavy metal off-gassing, specifically arsenic. When guys in the smelting division got exposed to arsenic dust, they didn't just cough. Their sweat started to smell like bad garlic. Their breath smelled like it. They lost feeling in their boots. Their hair thinned out, and their skin turned a weird mottled gray. Dallas shook his head, dismissing the thought. Don't be an idiot, Dave. This was a high-rise in the middle of the financial district. This woman had doctors who probably charged by the second. She wasn't huffing industrial byproducts. She had some rich person disease. He stood up, grabbing his spray bottle. As he moved around the massive basalt desk, his boot crunched on something. He looked down. Hidden under the overhang of the desk were several shards of broken ceramic, a shattered coffee mug. He sighed, unhooking his dustpan. He swept up the pieces, dumping them into his bin. As he reached to grab a damp rag to wipe up the dried coffee stain, his hand brushed against the heavy, unglazed red pitcher sitting on her desk. He paused. He looked at the pitcher, then at the bowl of lemons next to it. He noticed a chalky, pale residue forming around the rim of the pitcher, right where the water line would sit. He reached out and ran a calloused thumb over the residue. He brought his thumb to his nose. It was faint, but it was there. That same sharp, metallic, garlicky bite. Dallas wiped his hand furiously on his pants. He stared at the pitcher. Unfired clay from certain regions was notoriously packed with heavy metals: lead, cadmium, arsenic. If you put acidic liquid in it, like lemon water, it would leach those metals out at a terrifying rate. It was a basic chemical reaction. They taught you that on day one of hazmat training. He stared at the locked doors of her private bathroom. He looked back at the trash can full of hair and bloody tissues. Not my problem, he told himself. Do your job, empty the trash, go home to Chloe. He grabbed the trash bag, tied it off with a harsh yank, and threw it into his cart. He wheeled out of the office, the heavy double doors clicking shut behind him, sealing the heat and the smell inside. 2 weeks later, it was pouring outside, heavy sheets of rain hammering against the reinforced glass of Aldridge Tower. It was 11:45 p.m. Dallas was running late. One of the floor buffers had broken down, spitting a trail of dirty water across the 58th floor that took him an hour to mop up by hand. His back was screaming, a dull, radiating ache that shot down his left leg. All he wanted was to finish the executive suite, clock out, and take a hot shower. He pushed his cart up to Caprice's office. He swiped his card. He didn't expect anyone to be inside. The executives rarely stayed past 8. He pushed the door open. I said no disturbances, Thomas, a voice snapped from the dark. Dallas froze, his hand still on the heavy brass handle of the door. The only light in the room came from the sprawling cityscape outside and the glow of a single desk lamp. Caprice Aldridge was sitting on the floor behind her desk. She was slumped against the wall, her knees pulled to her chest. She was wearing a silk blouse that was soaked in sweat, clinging to her emaciated frame. Her breathing was ragged, shallow gasps that sounded like torn paper. I'm sorry, Miss Aldridge, Dallas stammered, immediately taking a step back. I'm just the night crew. I thought the office was empty. I'll come back. Don't, she gasped out. She tried to raise a hand to wave him off, but the tremor was violent. Her entire arm shook, her wrist bent at an unnatural, limp angle. Don't. Leave it. Dallas stood frozen in the doorway. The self-preservation instinct screamed at him to back away, close the door, and pretend he saw nothing. You don't walk in on the CEO when she's vulnerable. That was how you got fired. But then she choked. It was a wet, horrific sound. She leaned sideways, her hands scrambling against the smooth floor, trying to find purchase. Dallas didn't think. He let go of the door and hurried across the room, his heavy boots thudding against the hardwood. He dropped to his knees beside her. Hey, he said, keeping his voice low, the way he did when Chloe woke up from a night terror. Hey, look at me. You're okay. I'm gonna get you some water. Caprice's eyes were wide, panicked. The whites of her eyes were heavily bloodshot. Can't, she whispered. Legs, numb. Can't feel them. All right. Just breathe, Dallas said. He reached up to her desk. The heavy red clay pitcher was sitting there, half full. A glass with a squeezed lemon wedge sat beside it. Dallas grabbed the glass and the pitcher. No, Caprice hissed, her voice suddenly sharp, venomous. She slapped weakly at his arm. Don't touch that. It's customized. Sterile. You need water, Dallas said bluntly. He poured the liquid from the pitcher into the glass. As he brought the glass down to her, Caprice reached for it. Her hands were shaking so violently she couldn't grip the crystal. Dallas reached out to steady her hands. His rough, calloused fingers wrapped over hers. Her skin was freezing, slick with cold sweat. But it wasn't the temperature that made Dallas stop. It was her fingernails. The polish had chipped away, revealing the nail beds underneath. Across every single nail, running horizontally from edge to edge, were distinct, stark white bands. They were thick, unmistakable lines interrupting the natural pink of the nail. Mies lines. Dallas stared at them. His breath hitched. He had seen those exact lines on a foreman named Sal 12 years ago, right before Sal went into multiple organ failure from chronic arsenic exposure. Caprice tried to pull the glass to her mouth, breathing heavily through her mouth. The smell hit Dallas squarely in the face. In the enclosed space down on the floor, it was overwhelming. The sweet, pungent rot of garlic and metal. She took a sip of the lemon water. Dallas looked at her hands. He looked at the smell. He looked up at the heavy, unglazed red clay pitcher sitting on the desk above them. Give me the glass, Dallas said. His voice had changed. It wasn't the deferential, apologetic tone of a janitor anymore. It was hard, flat. Caprice glared at him, her pride temporarily overriding her pain. Excuse me, she wheezed. Do you know who you are talking to? Get out of my office. Give me the glass, Dallas repeated. He didn't wait for her permission. He reached out and took the heavy crystal tumbler from her trembling, numb hands. He set it on the floor, out of her reach. What is wrong with you? Caprice demanded, trying to push herself up against the wall, failing and sliding back down. I will have security drag you out of here. Miss Aldridge, Dallas said, sitting back on his heels. He looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the wealth, beneath the terrifying aura of power, she was just a dying woman in the dark. How much are you paying those doctors of yours? Caprice blinked, utterly derailed by the question. The sheer audacity of it broke through her panic. What? The doctors, Dallas said, gesturing vaguely to the room. The ones who can't figure out why your nerves are dying and your hair is falling out. How much? Millions, Caprice spat out, the word tasting like bile. And they are the best in the world. Now, get my phone. I need my driver. They're missing it, Dallas said quietly. He reached out and gently grabbed her wrist. She flinched, but she was too weak to pull away. He turned her hand over, exposing the pale, chipped nails to the light of the desk lamp. You see these white lines? Dallas asked, tapping her index finger. They're called Mies lines. It's a textbook physiological response to heavy metal toxicity. Caprice stared at him, her chest heaving. What are you talking about? I don't work in a coal mine. I run a logistics firm. I've been tested for environmental toxins. My house is purified. Yeah, Dallas said. He let go of her hand and stood up. He grabbed the red clay pitcher from the desk. It was heavy. He held it up in the dim light. Where did you get this? Caprice looked at the pitcher, confusion warring with the pain in her abdomen. It's imported. Volcanic clay. Dr. Blackwell sourced it. It alkalizes the water. It's unglazed earth, Dallas corrected, his voice tight. From a volcanic region. You know what volcanic soil is packed with? Arsenic. And you know what draws arsenic out of unglazed porous clay faster than anything else? He pointed to the bowl of lemons. Citric acid. The silence in the room stretched, thick and heavy. The sound of the rain lashing against the glass suddenly seemed deafening. You drink this every day? Dallas asked. Caprice stared at the pitcher. Her mind, usually a terrifyingly sharp instrument, felt sluggish, fighting through the brain fog. 2 liters a day, she whispered, for the last 8 months. Since my stomach issues started. Since the symptoms started, Dallas corrected. Your doctors are looking for genetic ghosts, lady, but you've been actively poisoning yourself with a $500 mud jug every single day. Caprice looked up at him. The man in the blue uniform. The man who emptied her trash. She looked at his tired eyes, the deep lines around his mouth. Arsenic? She whispered, the word feeling strange on her tongue. The metallic taste in her mouth suddenly made perfect, horrific sense. Arsenic, Dallas confirmed. He walked over to the heavy stainless steel trash can on his cart. He held the pitcher over it. Wait, Caprice said, a sudden, desperate command. Dallas paused. Caprice looked at the pitcher. The thing that had promised healing. The thing that had stolen her strength, her dignity, and millions of dollars. The contradiction of it, the absurdity of her hyper-curated, ridiculously expensive life being the exact thing killing her, crashed into her. A choked, broken sound escaped her throat. It took Dallas a second to realize it was a laugh. It was a terrible, dry, cynical laugh that turned into a ragged cough. Throw it away, Caprice rasped, resting her head back against the wall, closing her eyes. Throw the damn thing away. Dallas dropped the pitcher. It hit the bottom of the empty steel bin with a heavy, satisfying crash, shattering into 100 toxic pieces. Glass crunched under Dallas's boot as he stepped back from the stainless steel bin. The heavy clay pitcher lay in ruin, a jagged pile of mud and toxic promise. He waited for the shouting. He waited for security to burst through the heavy double doors, drag him out by the collar, and strip him of his keycard. Instead, a suffocating silence settled over the room, broken only by the rhythmic, muted thud of the storm hitting the reinforced windows. Caprice did not scream. She stared at the floor, her hands resting limply on the expensive hardwood. Her chest heaved. The manic, vibrating tremor in her limbs had paused, overridden by a cold, paralyzing shock. She didn't feel the euphoric relief of a solved mystery. She felt incredibly, profoundly stupid. Thomas, she rasped. Her voice barely carried over the hum of the climate control. The heavy doors clicked open immediately. Her driver stepped into the suffocating heat of the office. He took in the scene, the shattered ceramic, the terrified janitor. His boss collapsed against the wall with absolute, unnerving neutrality. Ma'am? Thomas asked, his hand resting casually near the lapel of his suit. Get my chair, Caprice ordered, keeping her eyes fixed on the empty space where the pitcher used to sit. And call the sub-basement clinic. Wake up the on-call technician. Tell them to fire up the mass spectrometer. I want a heavy metals toxicology screen. Blood, urine, hair follicles, fast. Thomas didn't blink. Right away. Caprice finally turned her head, her neck muscles stiff and grinding. She looked at Dallas. He was gripping the handle of his mop cart so tightly his knuckles were white, looking like a man calculating the exact distance to the freight elevator. "You're coming with me," Caprice said. "I have 3 more floors to scrub," Dallas replied, his voice tight. "My shift supervisor deducts a half hour of pay if I'm 10 minutes late clocking out. I told you what I smelled. The rest is above my pay grade." "I will buy your shift supervisor," Caprice said. The sheer arrogance of the statement was a reflex, a hollow shield against the agonizing cramps twisting in her gut. "I will buy the company that contracted you. You are coming downstairs. If you're wrong, I am having you arrested for destroying my property. If you're right." She swallowed hard, the sweet, garlicky bile rising in her throat. "If you're right, I'm paying you for your time." The medical suite on the second subterranean level was a blindingly white, sterile shock to the system. It smelled sharply of ozone, rubbing alcohol, and cold, recycled air. Caprice sat perched on the edge of a stainless steel examination table, the thin paper crinkling under her weight. A terrified, sleep-deprived lab technician tied a tourniquet around her brittle arm. His hands shook slightly under her cold, unblinking stare. The needle slid in, drawing dark, sluggish blood into a plastic vial. Dallas stood rigidly by the door, arms crossed over his heavy canvas utility belt, looking entirely out of place amidst the multi-million-dollar diagnostic equipment. 40 agonizing minutes passed. The only sound was the low, rhythmic cycling of the centrifuge and the ticking of a wall clock. Then, the heavy glass doors hissed open. Dr. Andrew Blackwell rushed into the clinic. His hair was disheveled, and he had hastily thrown a wrinkled designer trench coat over a pair of silk pajamas. "Caprice, what is the meaning of this?" Blackwell demanded, his smooth, practiced bedside manner fracturing under the fluorescent lights. "Thomas practically broke down my door. Running random toxicology screens at 2 in the morning? We have a strict protocol." "The mitochondrial wash." "Shut up, Andrew," Caprice said. She didn't yell, she didn't have the breath for it, but the flat, deadened tone of her voice stopped the doctor cold. The lab technician cleared his throat. He was holding a freshly printed stack of papers, looking frantically between Blackwell and Caprice, clearly wishing he could evaporate into the sterile air. "Miss Aldridge," he stammered. The results." "Read them," Caprice commanded. "Your inorganic arsenic levels." The tech swallowed audibly. "Normal baseline is under 10 micrograms per liter. Yours is currently at 840. The machine flagged it as a critical, potentially fatal toxicity. Blackwell froze. The color drained from his manicured face, leaving him looking like a wax mannequin. That is impossible. We screened for environmental toxins in the first month. Your home is purified." "In the first month," Caprice echoed, her voice dropping to a dangerous, serrated whisper. "Before you prescribed me a heavy, unglazed, imported volcanic clay pitcher to alkalize my cellular structure, before I started squeezing a half-dozen acidic lemons into it every single day, citric acid and unbaked mud, Andrew, a high school chemistry student, could figure it out." Blackwell opened his mouth, then closed it. He stared at the floor tiles. He looked at the humming monitors. He looked everywhere except at Caprice's hollowed-out eyes. The wellness boutique in Gstaad swore by the firing process. "I was assured it was sealed. It was meant to be holistic." "You billed my holding company $24 million, Caprice said. The words fell like heavy stones in the quiet room. "You put me on experimental immunosuppressants that destroyed my white blood cell count. You told me my nervous system was spontaneously collapsing, and all I needed was to stop drinking out of a dirt cup." She slowly pushed herself off the examination table. Her legs wobbled, the neuropathy sending sharp, electric shocks up her calves, but she forced herself to stand. She gripped the edge of the metal table until her knuckles popped. "You're fired, Andrew," she said. "If I see you in this building again, Thomas will physically break your jaw. If you attempt to bill my family office for another cent, my legal team will bury you in litigation until your grandchildren are bankrupt. Now get out of my sight." Blackwell didn't argue. He turned on his heel and practically fled, the glass doors hissing shut behind him. Caprice let out a long, ragged exhale. The adrenaline was rapidly evaporating, leaving a hollow, agonizing exhaustion in its wake. She looked over at Dallas. He was still standing by the door, his face unreadable, his worn boots stark against the pristine white floor. "You were right," she said. "The admission tasted like ash and copper." "Yeah," Dallas said. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just looked bone-tired. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cracked smartphone, checking the time. It's 3:15 a.m. I missed the last bus. I have to walk 2 miles to the transit hub. My kid wakes up at 6. Caprice stared at him. She expected a demand. She expected a plea for money, for a reward, for a piece of her empire. She had spent her entire life surrounded by people who extracted value from every single interaction. Instead, this man just wanted to go home to his daughter. "Thomas," Caprice called out. The driver stepped into the lab. "Take Mr. Vanthorpe wherever he needs to go," Caprice instructed, sliding back onto the exam table and closing her eyes against the glaring lights. "And pull his employment file from Human Resources in the morning." Dallas stiffened, his grip tightening on his utility belt. "You said you wouldn't fire me if I was right." "I'm not firing you," Caprice murmured, rubbing her temples. "Just go home, Dallas." 6 weeks later, the diner smelled of burnt filter coffee, industrial floor degreaser, and old fryer grease. It was a chaotic sensory assault, entirely divorced from the sterile, temperature-controlled world Caprice usually inhabited. She sat in a cracked vinyl booth, staring at a laminated menu covered in a sticky, unidentifiable residue. The noise was constant heavy plates clattering against laminate, a line cook shouting an order, the low, mechanical death rattle of a struggling air conditioning unit above the door. Caprice picked up a heavy, chipped ceramic mug of black coffee. Her fingers still trembled, but she didn't drop it. She gripped the handle, feeling the rough, imperfect texture of the cheap ceramic. She could feel it. The numbness was retreating. It was not a magical, cinematic recovery. Chelation therapy was a brutal, medieval process. The intravenous drugs bound to the heavy metals in her bloodstream, ripping them out through her kidneys. The medication made her violently nauseous and made her sweat smell faintly of sulfur. Her hair was still thin, ruthlessly chopped into a severe, short bob to hide the breakage. She looked 10 years older, stripped of the glossy, aggressive veneer she had cultivated for decades. But she was alive, and the agonizing electric burn in her fingertips meant her nerves were slowly, painfully waking up. The bell above the diner door jingled. Dallas Vanthorpe walked in. He wore a faded canvas jacket over a gray t-shirt, looking just as exhausted as the night they met. He carried a white plastic pharmacy bag. He spotted her in the corner booth and stopped, his brow furrowing deep. He hesitated, clearly debating whether to turn around and walk right back out into the humid street before sighing and making his way over. He slid into the booth opposite her, setting the pharmacy bag on the sticky table. He didn't say anything. He just looked at her, taking in the short hair, the hollow cheeks, and the sharp, calculating eyes that were completely clear for the first time since he met her. "They make a terrible cup of coffee here," Caprice said, setting her mug down. "It's 75 cents, Dallas replied, leaning back against the cracked vinyl, his posture defensive. "You get what you pay for." "I've found that is rarely true," Caprice countered, a cynical, humorless smile touching the corner of her mouth. "I paid millions for a death sentence. You worked for $14 an hour and gave me my life back." Dallas looked away, staring out the streaked window at the gray sky. "I didn't do it to save you. I just hated the smell in that office. Reminded me of a bad time at the refinery." "I know," Caprice said. She reached into her tailored blazer, pulled out a thick manila folder, and slid it across the table. It stopped against his plastic pharmacy bag. "I read your file. 12 years as a pipe fitter. Hazmat certified. Fired when the refinery downsized. Lost your pension just as your daughter's medical bills started piling up." Dallas's jaw tightened. His eyes snapped back to hers, hard and hostile. "Did you track me down to audit my miserable life, Miss Aldridge? Because my kid has a specialist appointment across town in 2 hours, and I'm running on 3 hours of sleep." "Open the folder," Caprice said. Dallas glared at her, but he reached out and flipped the heavy cardstock open. Inside was a single, densely typed legal contract. "I fired my entire environmental compliance team last week," Caprice said, keeping her voice low, dropping the conversational pretense. "They signed off on lead paint in a packaging warehouse in Jakarta. They missed a cadmium leak in a shipping yard in Long Beach. They are credentialed, expensive idiots who look at spreadsheets instead of reality." Dallas frowned, scanning the first page of the document. "What is this?" "It's a job offer," Caprice said flatly. "Director of Logistics Safety and Environmental Oversight. You don't get a corner office. You'll be on the road. You'll travel to my facilities. You'll look at the pipes. You'll smell the air. You'll look at the hands and the fingernails of the people working on the floor. If something is wrong, you bypass the board, report directly to me, and we shut it down." Dallas stopped reading. He looked up at her, genuine disbelief fracturing his tired facade. "I'm a night shift janitor. I don't have a college degree." "I don't care," Caprice snapped, leaning forward, wincing slightly as a spike of pain shot up her spine. "Degrees gave me Andrew Blackwell. I need someone who knows what a chemical burn smells like. I need someone who isn't afraid to tell a billionaire she's actively drinking poison." She tapped a pale fingernail against the second page of the contract. "The salary is $300,000 a year, full corporate benefits. And there is a rider attached on page 4. It covers all pre-existing medical conditions for dependents. Top-tier pulmonary specialists. The kind of doctors that don't make you wait in line at a pharmacy with a plastic bag." Dallas looked down at the bag. It held Chloe's steroid inhalers. He had spent his last $50 on the copay. The diner roared around them. The smell of grease, the clatter of cheap plates, the stark, ugly reality of survival pressing in on them from all sides. "Why?" Dallas asked, his voice rough, scraping against the noise. "You could just write me a check. Give me $1 million hush money for saving your life and walk away. That's what people like you do." "Because I am a deeply selfish woman," Caprice said, her voice dropping, brutally honest. "I almost died because I surrounded myself with yes men who were too busy cashing my checks to notice I was rotting from the inside out. I need you on my payroll, Dallas, because I need someone who will look at the dirt. A check is a payoff. This is an investment in my own survival." Dallas stared at the contract. The paper was heavy, expensive. It represented security. It represented breath in his daughter's lungs. It represented an end to the brutal, grinding mathematics of poverty that kept him awake every night. He didn't trust her. She was a shark. She was cold, calculating, and fundamentally ruthless. But she was offering him a lifeline, built entirely on mutual, cynical necessity. He reached into his canvas jacket and pulled out a cheap plastic pen. He clicked it once, the sound sharp against the diner noise. "I get to choose my own schedule," Dallas said, his eyes locked on hers. "And if I find a hazard, you fix it. No red tape, no cost-benefit analysis. You fix the damn problem." "Agreed," Caprice said, not blinking. Dallas signed the paper. His signature was rough, jagged. He pushed the folder back across the table. Caprice closed the folder. She didn't smile. She didn't offer to shake his hand. They both knew exactly what this was. She picked up her mug, her fingers gripping the ceramic tightly, feeling the heat, feeling the painful, wonderful pulse of her own blood. She took a sip of the terrible coffee, and for the first time in a year, it tasted exactly like what it was. Thank you for experiencing this raw, unpredictable journey with us today. If this story of survival, truth, and the unseen details that change everything moved you, please hit the like button. Share it with someone who appreciates gritty, deeply human storytelling. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more intense, grounded narratives. Your support keeps these stories alive. Please leave a comment below with your genuine thoughts.
Hi, my name is Hidden Princess, the owner and manager of Hidden Princess. After watching the video, the CEO spent $100 million to cure her illness until a janitor, single dad, noticed one symptom. I'd really like to know what you think. How did this story make you feel? What stayed with me most was how easy it is to overlook simple human attention while searching for complicated answers. Marcus didn't have wealth, status, or a team of experts behind him. He just genuinely cared enough to notice what everyone else missed. That made the emotional core of the story feel much deeper than the business world surrounding it. I think the story quietly reminds us that compassion and attentiveness can sometimes matter more than power or money. Have you ever had someone notice something important about you that others ignored? And which moment made you realize the CEO's view of Marcus was beginning to change? If this story stayed with you after watching, feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts. And if you enjoy emotional stories about kindness, family, and unexpected connection, you can like or subscribe to support the channel.